Welcome back, everyone, to the deep dive. This time, we're really diving deep into the idea of building better habits, better systems, just better lives overall. And we're doing that with James Clear's Atomic Habits. Today, we'll be focusing on just Chapter 1.
A great choice. I think Chapter 1 really sets the stage for everything else Clear wants us to learn.
Definitely a good foundation. And I think everyone's familiar with that saying about how do you eat an elephant?
One bite at a time.
Yeah, exactly. And that's really what Atomic Habits is all about, those tiny changes that add up to big results over time.
Absolutely. What's so fascinating about Clear's approach is that it's not just about willpower or motivation. It's about understanding the science of how habits work and then using that knowledge to create systems that make success inevitable.
And he's got some amazing stories to back it all up, right?
Oh, tons. One that really stood out to me, and I know we'll get into it more later, was the story of the British cycling team. I mean, talk about a transformation.
Oh, yeah. Before 2003, British cycling was basically a non-entity in the world of professional cycling. They were so far behind that other teams didn't even consider them a threat.
There's this crazy story, I don't know if it's apocryphal or not, but apparently a major bike manufacturer refused to sell bikes to the British team because they thought it would hurt their brand.
Ouch. Yeah, I think I read that too. But then they bring in this guy, Dave Brailsford, as the new performance director, and everything changes.
And Brailsford had this radical idea. He was like, forget the grand gestures. Let's focus on the tiny details, on 1% improvements that everyone else is overlooking. He called it the aggregation of marginal gains.
Which sounds super complicated, but from what I understand, it's actually a pretty simple concept, right?
Yeah. Basically, it's about finding a 1% improvement in every single aspect of their training and performance. That could be anything from redesigning the bike seats to testing different tire pressures, even figuring out the best way for riders to recover after a race.
Wait, hold on. They were optimizing recovery techniques too. That seems a bit, intense, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah. It gets pretty wild. They looked at everything. Sleep positions, nutrition, even the type of massage gel they were using. Brailsford's philosophy was that if you can find a way to get 1% better in every area, all those small gains will compound into a massive advantage.
And it sounds like he was right. I mean, the British cycling team went from being a laughingstock to dominating the sport. It's amazing. But honestly, it's still kind of hard for me to grasp how all these little things could add up to such a huge difference. Like, how much impact can changing your pillow really have on your cycling performance?
It's easy to underestimate the power of 1%, especially because we often expect to see immediate and dramatic results. But the reality is that lasting change happens gradually.
It's like compound interest. Small investments over time can lead to huge gains in the long run.
Exactly. And Claire illustrates this beautifully with a graph in the book, which, by the way, I highly recommend everyone check out. The graph shows the difference between getting 1% better each day versus getting 1% worse.
That's got to be a big difference, right?
Oh, it's massive. After a year, the person who's improving 1% is almost 37 times better than they were when they started. And the person declining by 1% is almost down to 0.
Wow, that's incredible. So what you're saying is it's not about making some big drastic change. It's about being consistent with those small improvements over time. But that brings up another question for me. How do you stay motivated when you're making all these tiny changes and you don't see any immediate results? I feel like it'd be easy to just give up and say, this isn't working.
Oh, absolutely. And that's where the concept of the valley of disappointment comes in. Clear talks about how we often expect progress to be linear. We put in the effort and we want to see the results right away.
But that's not always how it works, is it?
Nope. In the beginning, you're putting in all this work, but you're not seeing any tangible rewards. It feels like you're spinning your wheels and getting nowhere. And that could be incredibly discouraging.
It's like when you start a new diet or workout routine. You're sore, you're tired, you're missing out on all the fun foods, but you don't see any changes in the mirror. It's so tempting to just throw in the towel.
Exactly. And that's where understanding the science of habit formation becomes so crucial. Our brains are wired to seek out immediate rewards. When we do something pleasurable, our brain releases dopamine, and that reinforces that behavior, making us want to do it again.
But with habits, especially new ones, the reward is often delayed.
Right. And that can make it tough to stay motivated in the beginning.
Yeah.
So how do you bridge that gap? How do you keep going when the dopamine isn't flowing right away?
That's the million-dollar question.
Well, Clear introduces this idea of the plateau of latent potential. He says that we need to shift our mindset away from expecting instant gratification and embrace the fact that habits need time to compound before we see significant results.
Okay, I'm kind of getting it now. So it's like planting a seed, right? You don't see the sprout right away, but you keep watering it, you keep nurturing it, trusting that eventually it'll break through the surface.
Exactly. If you keep digging it up every day to check if it's growing, you'll probably end up killing it before it has a chance to sprout.
Great analogy. So patience and consistency are key when it comes to building lasting habits.
Absolutely. And the British cycling team's a perfect example of this. Their success didn't happen overnight. It took years of dedicated incremental improvement to reach the top of their sport. But it wasn't just about enduring the tough times. It was about creating a system that made it easier for them to stick with those small improvements.
So it sounds like they didn't just focus on what they wanted to achieve, the goals, but also how they were going to achieve them, the systems. And that leads us to another important concept from the book: systems over goals. Systems over goals. So you're telling me that instead of fixating on winning those Olympic medals, they were more concerned with, like what kind of pillows they were sleeping on.
Well, it wasn't quite that simple. It's not about abandoning ambition or replacing it with a bunch of trivial tasks. It's more about realizing that goals are kind of like the destination.
And systems are the roadmap that gets you there.
Exactly. If you only focus on the destination, you might miss out on those critical steps along the way, those little course corrections that keep you moving in the right direction.
So how does this whole systems over goals thing actually play out in the real world? Like, how did it work for British cycling?
Well, for them, it was about establishing this culture of continuous improvement. They documented everything.
Really? Everything?
Yeah, pretty much. Everything from their training schedules to how they maintained their bikes. And then they were constantly looking for ways to optimize those processes. And they didn't just celebrate their wins.
They learned from their losses, too.
Exactly. They analyzed their failures, trying to figure out where their system had broken down and what they could do to improve it.
So it was like a constant feedback loop.
Yeah, you could say that. It wasn't just blindly chasing those marginal gains. It was about having a framework for implementing them and making sure they actually stuck.
So they weren't just saying, hey, let's get 1% better. They were actually figuring out how to make those 1% improvements a part of their daily routine.
Exactly. And that's a super important distinction because Clear points out that goals are often kind of arbitrary, like they're just finish lines that we set for ourselves. You might achieve a goal, but if you haven't built a system to support that achievement, you're probably going to slip back into your old habits.
It's like going on a crash diet to fit into a dress for a wedding. You might lose the weight, but if you haven't actually changed your eating habits, you're going to gain it all back as soon as the wedding is over.
Perfect analogy. And Clear actually lays out 4 major problems with having a goals-first mentality. The first one is that winners and losers often have the same goals. Think about it. Everyone who enters the Olympics wants to win a gold medal.
But only a tiny fraction of them actually do.
Right. So clearly, just having a goal isn't enough. It's the system that you build around that goal that makes the difference. It's the habits, the routines, the daily practices that separate the people who succeed from the people who don't.
So it's not about the what, it's about the how.
Exactly. And it leads to a second point. Achieving a goal is often just a momentary change. You might hit your target, but if you haven't built sustainable habits, you're probably going to fall back into those old patterns before you know it.
Okay, that makes sense. What are the other 2 problems with this whole goals-first approach?
Well, the third one is a little bit deeper. He says that constantly chasing goals can actually prevent you from being happy. If you're always delaying gratification, you're never really allowing yourself to be content in the present moment.
You're always saying, I'll be happy when I reach this goal, or I'll be happy when I get that promotion. But you're never really stopping to appreciate what you already have.
Right. It's like you're living your life on fast forward, always looking ahead to the next thing, but never really savoring the moment.
And what's the 4th problem?
Clear's 4th point is that goals can sometimes get in the way of long-term progress. You get so focused on reaching that one specific outcome that you miss out on other opportunities for growth and learning that might pop up along the way.
It's like having tunnel vision. You're so fixated on the end goal that you don't even see the other paths that might lead you to something even better.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. A systems-based approach, on the other hand, is all about continuous improvement. It's about embracing the journey, not just the destination. Finding joy in the process of getting better, regardless of whether you've achieved some arbitrary outcome.
That's a really powerful shift in perspective. But but I'm still a little bit fuzzy on how we actually go about building a system that supports our goals. Like, it's easy to say systems over goals, but how do you actually put that into practice?
Well, that's where the whole concept of atomic habits comes in. Remember, we were talking about how even those tiny changes can add up to massive results over time.
Yeah, the compound interest thing.
Right? Well, those tiny changes, those are the building blocks of your system. They're the small incremental adjustments to your daily routines and your behaviors that when you compound them, lead to those amazing outcomes.
So instead of overwhelming yourself with some huge, audacious goal, you break it down into smaller, more manageable habits, little things that you can easily incorporate into your everyday life.
It's like building a house, brick by brick. Each brick on its own might seem pretty insignificant, but when you put them all together, they form a strong and stable structure.
So it's about shifting your focus from making these big, dramatic changes to just taking consistent action.
Exactly. It's about understanding that lasting change doesn't happen overnight. It happens gradually, through the accumulation of small, deliberate efforts over time.
But that doesn't mean that we should just passively wait for those small changes to magically add up, right? We need a plan. We need some sort of strategy for actually making those changes stick. And that's where Clear's 4 laws of behavior change come in, don't they?
You got it. He gives us these 4 simple but really effective principles for building good habits and breaking bad ones. Make it obvious, make it attractive, make it easy, and make it satisfying.
All right, let's dive into these laws. Make it obvious. What exactly does that mean when we're trying to build new habits?
Well, think about it like this. What are the cues that usually trigger your current habits? Say you want to start drinking more water throughout the day.
Okay, yeah.
You could put a big water bottle right on your desk where you can't miss it.
So you see it all the time.
Right, exactly. That's your visual cue that makes the habit super obvious. And when it's right there in front of you, you're way more likely to actually do it.
Makes sense. Makes sense. It's like laying out your workout clothes the night before, so you're ready to go in the morning.
Exactly. You're setting yourself up for success. Okay, what about make it attractive? That one sounds kind of psychological. Right?
Yeah, a little bit.
It is. This is all about tapping into those rewards and that motivation we were talking about earlier. If you can find a way to actually make a habit enjoyable, you're going to be way more likely to stick with it in the long run.
So it's like if you're trying to read more, maybe you create a cozy reading nook in your house, or you join a book club so you can talk about the books with friends.
Yeah, that's perfect. You're associating the habit with positive feelings and making it something that you actually look forward to.
Okay, I'm digging this. So what about make it easy? That one seems pretty straightforward, right?
It is. It's all about reducing friction, eliminating obstacles, and just generally simplifying the whole process. The easier a habit is to do, the more likely you are to actually do it, right? Like if you're trying to get into meditation, you could download an app that offers those guided meditations, especially for beginners.
Yeah, instead of trying to just sit there in silence for like an hour.
Right. Start small, make it manageable, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever works for you. You're removing those barriers to entry and making it as easy as possible to get started.
Okay, that's really helpful. And last but not least, make it satisfying. This is where the dopamine kicks in, doesn't it?
It does. This is all about those rewards. When we get a reward after doing something, our brain's like, hey, I like that. Let's do it again. It reinforces the behavior and makes us more likely to repeat it in the future.
So if I want to make going to the gym a habit, maybe I reward myself with a healthy smoothie afterward, or I track my progress in a fitness app to see how far I've come.
That's it. You're creating a positive feedback loop. You're giving your brain a reason to crave that habit.
This is brilliant. The best part is that these 4 laws can be applied to any habit, no matter how big or small it is. It's like a universal framework for creating lasting change.
Yeah, exactly. It's not about willpower or motivation. It's about understanding the science of how habits work and then working with your brain, not against it.
As we wrap up this deep dive into atomic habits, I'm feeling pretty inspired. It's like Clear has handed us this set of tools that we can use to shape our own destinies, one tiny habit at a time.
It's a reminder that we're not just stuck with whatever habits we've picked up along the way. We have the power to design our lives habit by habit and create a future that we actually want to live in.
It all starts with that first 1% improvement. So what's one tiny change you can make today? What's one small habit that you can implement that will set you on a path toward achieving those bigger goals? Remember, make it obvious, make it attractive, make it easy, and make it satisfying. And even though it's just one small step, those small actions, when you repeat them consistently, they can lead to some pretty extraordinary results. Thanks for joining us on the deep dive. Until next time,